The diner was quiet that morning, with the sunlight just beginning to spill through the windows, casting a warm glow across the worn tables and checkered floors. The waitress moved between the tables with practiced ease, carrying plates of eggs, bacon, and toast, greeting the few regulars who had already started their day. She had worked here for a few years, and in that time she had seen all kinds of people. Families with laughter bouncing across the room, businessmen hunched over their coffee, and lonely souls quietly eating by themselves. But there was something different about that morning, something she couldn't put her finger on. It was the feeling that today something important was about to happen. As she stacked clean plates behind the counter, she noticed him. An older man had shuffled in from the chilly morning air, wearing a coat that looked far too thin for the weather. His boots were scuffed and dusty, and his hands, rough and calloused, clutched a small worn hat. There was a hesitancy in his steps, a quietness that made him almost blend into the background, but the moment he entered, she couldn't ignore him. He seemed tired in a way that went beyond just sleep. It was the kind of tired that comes from years of hard work, of battles fought and of struggles endured. She recognized it, not from experience, but from seeing people who carried invisible burdens. Something inside her urged her to pay attention. The man walked slowly to the back corner of the diner and settled into a booth by himself. He didn't look around much, just stared down at the menu with tired eyes, tracing the edges of the paper as if it held secrets he needed to understand. The waitress paused for a moment, wiping her hands on her apron, debating whether she should approach. Most of the time she would wait for a customer to call her over, but this time felt different. She could see the hesitation in his movements, the way he kept checking the counter as if he might disappear if anyone noticed him. She felt a tug in her chest, a quiet nudge that told her he needed help. She walked over and knelt slightly to be at his level. "Good morning," she said softly. "What can I get for you today?" He looked up at her, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. There was a flicker of surprise, as if he hadn't expected anyone to speak kindly to him. He opened his mouth to reply but hesitated, lowering his gaze back to the menu. I don't have any money," he said quietly, his voice rough but polite. He sounded embarrassed, ashamed, and it broke her heart. Without thinking too much, she smiled warmly. "It's okay," she said gently. "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it for you. Just pick whatever you want." He blinked, clearly not expecting such kindness. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Absolutely," she replied, trying to keep her tone light and reassuring. "Everyone deserves a good breakfast. Don't worry about paying. Just enjoy your meal." He nodded slowly, a mixture of gratitude and discomfort crossing his face. He didn't know how to respond properly, so he simply chose a plate of eggs, toast, bacon, and a cup of coffee. She wrote down the order and promised she'd bring it out quickly. As she walked away, she couldn't help but glance back at him. There was something about his presence that felt important, as if his story was far from ordinary. As she prepared the breakfast, she found herself thinking about him more than she expected. She wondered what his life had been like, what challenges he had faced, and how he ended up here sitting quietly in a corner of her diner. She knew she didn't have all the answers, and she knew she couldn't solve all his problems. But she could give him this one small moment of comfort. It seemed like a simple gesture, but she hoped it would mean more to him than just a meal. When she brought the breakfast to his table, she set the plate down gently in front of him. "Here you go," she said, smiling. "Enjoy." He looked at the food as if seeing it for the first time, his eyes wide. He lifted the fork slowly, almost hesitantly, and took a bite, then another. It was clear he hadn't eaten like this in a long time, and the taste seemed to bring a small spark of joy back into his eyes. He ate quietly, savoring each bite, and she gave him space, watching from a distance, making sure he had everything he needed. Other customers came in and out, some giving him curious glances, some whispering among themselves, but she treated him like any other guest, with respect and attention, checking occasionally if he wanted more coffee or anything else. He never asked for anything extra, and she never offered with the expectation of repayment. It was simply about giving him a moment of dignity, a reminder that he mattered. As he finished the meal, he looked up at her again. This time there were tears in his eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that had been missing for a long time. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking slightly. I haven't felt this treated like a person in a long time. She smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that she hadn't expected. "You deserve it," she said softly. "Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He nodded, wiping his eyes and trying to regain composure. He stood slowly, gathering his coat and hat, and turned to leave. She watched him walk out the door, disappearing into the morning light, and felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. She had offered him a small kindness, but she knew that the struggles he faced were much larger than a single meal. For the rest of her shift, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She thought about the stories behind the eyes of people who came into the diner, about the invisible battles they fought, and about how small gestures could sometimes make a world of difference. She continued serving customers, clearing tables, and pouring coffee, but her mind kept returning to the older man in the corner. She wondered if he would be okay, if he would find the help and support he needed, and if he would remember her kindness. Little did she know, her small act of generosity was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his life, but hers as well. That simple breakfast, served with no expectation and only the desire to show care, was the beginning of a story that would touch many lives and remind everyone who heard it that compassion could open doors no one imagined. And so the morning continued in the diner, the smell of coffee and fresh toast filling the air, but a quiet sense of something extraordinary lingered, waiting to reveal itself in ways that would surprise them all. After the breakfast, the waitress returned to her routine, but her mind kept wandering back to the older man who had quietly eaten in her diner. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story, and she found herself hoping he would come back so she could learn even a little about him. She thought about the medal tucked inside his coat, the photograph he had clutched, and the way he carried himself with a quiet dignity, despite his worn appearance. She knew that somewhere beneath the tired eyes and ragged clothes, there was a life filled with stories and experiences that deserved to be seen and honored. The morning passed slowly, the diner filling and emptying as the small town went about its day. Families came in for pancakes and coffee. Businessmen stopped by for a quick breakfast, and children ran in and out, their laughter echoing through the room. Yet the corner where the veteran had sat remained empty, a quiet reminder of the man who had walked in like a shadow and left a mark on her heart. The waitress went about her work, serving food and chatting with customers, but she couldn't help thinking about the man's eyes and the small gestures he had made, folding his napkin with care, lifting his cup of coffee as if it was a treasure, and the way he had looked up at her when he spoke his thank you. She began to wonder about the life that had led him here. Perhaps he had fought in wars long ago, risking everything for people he didn't even know. Perhaps he had lost friends, family, or opportunities along the way. The thought made her feel a mix of sorrow and admiration. There was bravery in his quiet existence, a kind of courage that didn't need to be shouted about but still demanded recognition. She imagined him walking through battlefields, facing hardships that most could not even picture, and then returning home to a world that did not always understand the weight he carried. Now here he was, trying to survive with little more than his memories and the kindness of strangers. As she cleared a table, she found herself daydreaming about the simple act of serving him breakfast. It had been such a small thing, yet she could see how it had touched him deeply. She thought about how often people overlooked those who struggled, how easy it was to ignore someone who appeared different, tired, or broken. But she had seen him. She had given him a moment of dignity, and somehow that made her feel that she had done something meaningful, even if it was just one meal, one conversation, and one smile. The waitress cleaned the counter and glanced at the clock. It was still early in the day, but she felt a restlessness she couldn't explain. She found herself hoping he would return, even though she didn't know what she could do beyond what she had already done. Maybe he needed someone to listen, someone to acknowledge his life, or maybe he needed nothing at all except that moment of kindness she had given him. Either way, she felt a connection, a quiet understanding that sometimes people needed to feel seen, even for just a few minutes. Around mid-morning, a few regular customers came in and struck up small conversations. They commented on the weather, the town news, and the usual daily chatter. The waitress smiled and participated politely, but her thoughts kept returning to the older man. She remembered the way he had eaten slowly, savoring every bite, and how carefully he had looked at the menu, as if choosing his meal was a moment of reflection and respect. She wondered if he had anyone waiting for him, if he had a family who missed him, or if he had friends who had drifted away over the years. Each thought brought a mixture of curiosity and compassion. She didn't want to assume anything, but she wanted to understand him better, to see the man beyond the clothes and the tired expression. While she served a customer a cup of coffee, she noticed movement outside the window. It was him. He had returned, walking slowly and cautiously, as if unsure whether he belonged in this space. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly excused herself from the table she was helping and walked over to him, offering a warm smile. "Good morning," she said gently. "Would you like to sit down again?" He nodded, relief washing over his face. He seemed grateful that someone remembered him, that someone cared enough to notice him once more. He sat in the same corner booth, folding his hands neatly on the table. She brought him a menu, but he shook his head. "Whatever you recommend," he said quietly, his voice carrying the same humility and gratitude as before. She suggested a simple plate of eggs and toast with some fruit, and he nodded again, trusting her choice. As she prepared his order, she couldn't help but notice the small details that spoke volumes about him. The way he kept a careful posture, the way he adjusted his coat, and the quiet strength in his hands told her that he had lived a life that required resilience. She brought the meal over, placing it gently on the table. He looked up at her with a small, almost shy smile, and she felt a warmth that spread through her chest. She had no idea how much this breakfast meant to him, but she could see it in his eyes. A flicker of hope, comfort, and gratitude. He ate slowly again, taking his time with each bite, savoring the food and the moment. The waitress watched from a distance, feeling a sense of peace in the quiet interaction. No one else in the diner seemed to notice him in the same way she did. To everyone else, he was just another customer, an older man trying to make do. But to her, he was someone who deserved respect, someone whose story mattered, someone who reminded her of the value of small acts of kindness. As he finished the meal, he leaned back in his seat looking thoughtful. "Thank you again," he said softly. "You don't know how much this means to me." His voice carried a quiet sincerity, and she could see the gratitude reflected in every line of his face. She smiled, reassuring him that it was no trouble at all. "It's my pleasure," she said. "Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness, and I'm glad I could help." He nodded, gathering his coat and hat once more. As he stood to leave, he paused and looked at her, his eyes meeting hers with a depth that spoke more than words ever could. "You're one of the few people who make me feel human again," he said. She felt a lump in her throat, touched by his honesty and the vulnerability he had shown. She nodded, understanding that sometimes just being seen and treated with respect could restore a sense of dignity that life had taken away. After he left, the waitress returned to her duties, carrying a quiet sense of fulfillment with her. She continued to serve customers, clean tables, and pour coffee, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. She thought about the stories he might carry, the battles he had fought, and the life he had lived. She realized that one small act of kindness, a simple breakfast, could ripple out in ways she couldn't yet imagine. And somewhere deep inside she felt a growing sense of purpose, knowing that her actions, no matter how small, could make a real difference in someone's life. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine, but the memory of the veteran lingered with her. She thought about how many people went through life unseen, unnoticed, and unappreciated, and she resolved to continue noticing, continuing to offer kindness wherever she could. It was a lesson in empathy and humanity, one that she would carry with her long after the plates were cleared and the coffee cups washed. She didn't yet know how much this moment would change her life, or his, but she knew that sometimes the smallest gestures mattered the most, and that compassion could be the first step towards something extraordinary. A little later that morning, the diner door opened with a chime, and in walked a man whose presence immediately filled the room. He was tall, confident, and carried himself with the ease of someone who had spent years in positions of influence. His suit was sharp, polished, and impeccable, and his calm, measured steps gave him an air of authority. The regulars in the diner noticed him instantly, exchanging quick glances and whispers. Everyone seemed to know who he was, the most powerful man in the town, a person whose decisions shaped local businesses and influenced community matters. But as he looked around, he didn't seem concerned with the attention. Instead, he quietly scanned the room, observing people as they went about their morning routines. The waitress noticed him as soon as he walked in. She had seen him before, of course, around town at charity events or in news stories. He was someone who commanded respect, someone who had the ability to make things happen. But seeing him here in her small diner was different. He greeted the owner politely, asked about the breakfast rush, and took a seat near the counter, casually looking at the menu, but mostly observing the room. There was a calmness in his demeanor, a quiet intelligence that seemed to notice everything without drawing attention to itself. As he sat, he seemed drawn to the empty corner booth where the veteran had sat earlier. He asked the waitress a few questions about the morning, making small talk, but his eyes kept returning to that corner. The waitress watched him carefully, wondering if he recognized the significance of that seat, or if he simply noticed that something had occurred there. She continued her work, serving other customers, but she felt a growing sense of anticipation. Something told her that the arrival of this man was connected to the morning in ways she couldn't yet understand. The powerful man continued observing quietly, noticing the way the waitress interacted with everyone. He saw her attentiveness, her patience, and the care with which she treated each customer. Her manner was natural, unforced, and genuine. She didn't just serve food. She offered respect, acknowledgement, and warmth. He had seen many people with influence, people who held power over others, but few acted with such humility and kindness in everyday interactions. It caught his attention. After a few moments, he called the waitress over. She approached cautiously, unsure why someone of his stature wanted to speak with her. He greeted her warmly, smiling in a way that was both kind and authoritative. "I've been watching you this morning," he said in a low, calm voice. "You treat people with care and respect even when it goes unnoticed." "That's rare." The waitress felt a flush of surprise and modesty. "Thank you," she said quietly, unsure how to respond. "I just try to treat people like I'd want to be treated." He nodded, clearly pleased with her response. "It's more than that. You have a gift, and it shows. There's someone who came in earlier, a man in the corner booth, an older gentleman. I noticed him leave, and I wanted to ask about him." The waitress paused, her curiosity piqued. "He's a veteran," she explained softly. "He's been through a lot. This morning I served him breakfast on the house. I just wanted him to feel respected and cared for, even for a little while." The man leaned back slightly, thoughtful. He had a sharp mind for people, for reading situations, and for noticing the unnoticed. He could see that the waitress's act had genuine impact, that it had given the veteran more than food. It had given him dignity, a sense of being seen and valued. "You understand something many people overlook," he said. "Kindness isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's the small, quiet moments that make the biggest difference." The waitress felt a warmth at his words, but remained humble. "I just try to do what I can," she said. "Everyone deserves to feel human, even if it's just for a short time." He smiled, clearly impressed. "I agree. And sometimes those small actions can set off something much larger. I'd like to ask you something. Would you be willing to help me with a project I'm working on? It's about helping veterans in our town who are struggling." Her eyes widened slightly, surprise and curiosity mingling together. "Of course," she said. "I'd be happy to help in any way I can." He nodded, leaning forward. "You have an instinct for compassion, for seeing people for who they truly are. I want you to be part of a community program I'm creating. It's meant to support veterans, especially those who have fallen on hard times. But more than that, I want people like you, who act from the heart, to guide it. Your perspective is important." The waitress felt a mix of excitement and disbelief. She had simply served breakfast, acted on a moment of empathy, and now she was being asked to participate in something larger. She realized that her small act had not gone unnoticed, that it had created ripples beyond what she could have imagined. She nodded earnestly, feeling a sense of purpose growing inside her. "I'd be honored," she said. "If I can make even a small difference, I want to help." He smiled warmly, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "Good. There's someone I want to find, someone I believe could be helped in a meaningful way. He's the man you served breakfast to earlier. I've been looking for him, and I want to make sure he gets the support he needs. With your help, I think we can make a real difference." Her heart lifted, a mix of hope and excitement. She had not expected anything in return for her kindness, but the thought that her simple act could lead to something so meaningful filled her with joy. She thought about the veteran, about the pride and sadness in his eyes, and about the struggles he must face every day. The idea that they could offer him help, stability, and dignity made her feel that her morning had been more important than she had realized. As they spoke, The powerful man and the waitress began planning the next steps. They discussed how to locate the veteran, how to ensure he received housing, medical care, and support for daily needs. They talked about resources, about the small gestures that could build trust, and about creating a welcoming environment where he and others like him would feel valued. The waitress listened intently, offering suggestions based on her experience and intuition. She realized that her perspective, shaped by empathy and everyday human interactions, was just as important as influence and money in making real change. Meanwhile, the regulars in the diner continued their routines, unaware of the conversation happening at the counter. The waitress and the powerful man were quietly planning something significant, something that would change the life of one man and potentially many others. It was a reminder that sometimes the most impactful moments occur in small, ordinary places, in quiet conversations, and through acts of kindness that appear simple on the surface. After some time, the powerful man stood ready to leave. He thanked the waitress again, expressing his admiration for her approach to life and people. "Your heart makes a difference," he said. "Never forget that. Compassion is powerful, and you have it in abundance." The waitress nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and motivation. She watched him leave, knowing that his influence and resources would make a real difference for the veteran. But she also realized that her simple act, the decision to serve someone in need without judgment, was what had brought this connection into being. Her heart felt full, not just with pride but with hope for the future. As the morning continued and the diner filled with the usual bustle, she couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. She felt a renewed sense of purpose in her work, knowing that every interaction, every choice to act with kindness, had the potential to ripple outward in ways she could never fully anticipate. And she waited, quietly hoping for the next chapter in this story, knowing that the actions of a single morning could lead to changes that mattered far more than a plate of food or a simple conversation. She understood now that even the smallest gestures could create waves, and she was ready to see where this wave would lead. After the powerful man left, the waitress returned to her duties in the diner, but her mind was buzzing with thoughts about what had just happened. She felt a mix of excitement and anticipation. The morning had started as any other, serving coffee and breakfast to regulars, yet now it had turned into something far more meaningful. The conversation with the powerful man had opened her eyes to the larger picture, to the ways in which small acts of kindness could ripple out and change lives. She realized that what she had done for the veteran was only the beginning, and that there were more steps to take to ensure he received the help he needed. She continued her work, clearing tables and taking orders, but she found herself observing the customers more carefully than usual. Each person carried their own story, their own struggles and joys, and she felt a renewed awareness of the importance of seeing them, acknowledging them, and treating them with care. Her previous thoughts about empathy and human connection now seemed more urgent, more necessary. She understood that the kindness she had shown to the veteran was part of a larger pattern of compassion that could shape the lives of many if nurtured and guided. During a brief lull in the morning rush, the waitress received a phone call from the powerful man. He had begun locating the veteran using his resources, reaching out to shelters, local organizations, and people who might have seen him recently. He wanted her input on the best ways to approach him without making him feel pressured or uncomfortable. She suggested meeting him somewhere familiar to him, a place where he would feel safe and respected, and she emphasized the importance of patience and gentle communication. Her insights, rooted in empathy and personal interaction, complemented his influence and resources perfectly. As they talked, she learned that he had already identified several ways to support the veteran, including temporary housing, food assistance, and medical care. But he wanted to do more than just provide material support. He wanted to restore the veteran's sense of dignity and self-worth. He valued the waitress's perspective because she had already established a human connection with him, and she understood the nuances of trust, respect, and sensitivity that were essential in helping someone rebuild their life. Their conversation lasted longer than she expected, but she felt energized and determined to contribute in any way she could. Once the call ended, she returned to serving the customers, but her thoughts kept drifting to the veteran. She thought about the quiet strength he had shown in the diner, the way he had eaten slowly, and the dignity with which he carried himself despite his struggles. She imagined how he might feel knowing that someone influential was taking steps to help him, and how their combined efforts could transform his life. She felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that her empathy, her observation, and her willingness to act had played a crucial role in this process. As the morning wore on, she reflected on the importance of small acts of kindness. She realized that these actions often went unnoticed, yet they had the power to create significant change. Serving breakfast to the veteran had been a simple gesture, but it had opened doors, forged connections, and inspired larger actions. She understood that compassion, when paired with resources and influence, could create a powerful ripple effect. Her heart swelled with a mix of humility and hope, knowing that even her smallest decisions could have far-reaching consequences. Later in the day, she received another message from the powerful man, updating her on the progress he had made in locating the veteran. He had found him and arranged a discreet meeting at a local community center, a familiar and neutral place where he would feel comfortable. The waitress felt a wave of anticipation, knowing that the moment of reconnection was approaching. She prepared herself to accompany him, offering support, reassurance, and a friendly presence. She understood that her role was not just about providing material aid, but about human connection, empathy, and trust. When they arrived at the community center, the veteran was waiting, looking cautious but hopeful. The waitress approached him with a warm smile, offering a gentle greeting. "It's good to see you again," she said softly. "We wanted to make sure you have support and resources to help you in the coming days." The veteran looked at her, a mixture of surprise and relief in his eyes. He nodded slowly, clearly touched by the continued attention and care. The powerful man explained the resources that had been arranged, including temporary housing, food assistance, and medical support. But he also emphasized that the goal was to help the veteran regain independence and dignity, not just provide temporary relief. The waitress stood beside him, offering encouragement and reassurance, helping to create an atmosphere of trust and understanding. The veteran listened quietly, absorbing the information and the gestures of kindness. He began to speak, sharing small pieces of his story, his experiences, his struggles, and his feelings of isolation. The waitress listened intently, offering empathy and validation. She understood the importance of listening without judgment, of acknowledging his experiences and emotions, and of creating a safe space where he could feel seen and heard. The powerful man contributed as well, demonstrating respect and genuine concern, making it clear that their intentions were sincere and supportive. As the conversation continued, the veteran began to relax, his posture easing and his voice gaining confidence. He shared memories of his time in service, the challenges he had faced, and the moments of courage that had defined his life. The waitress responded with empathy and understanding, acknowledging the weight of his experiences and the resilience he had demonstrated. The powerful man also expressed admiration for his strength and bravery, reinforcing the sense of respect and validation that the veteran had long needed. By the end of their meeting, the veteran felt a renewed sense of hope. He understood that he was not alone, that people cared about his well-being, and that he had support to help him rebuild his life. The waitress and the powerful man had not only provided practical assistance, but had also restored a sense of dignity, trust, and human connection that had been missing for so long. It was a powerful reminder of the impact that empathy, kindness, and thoughtful action could have on someone's life. Afterward, the waitress returned to the diner, reflecting on the day's events. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her small act of kindness had sparked a series of events that would change the veteran's life. She realized that true compassion required more than good intentions. It required attention, action, and the willingness to engage with others in meaningful ways. She understood that her role in this story, though small in scale, had been crucial in creating a ripple effect of positive change. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the diner windows, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that there were countless others in the community who might need similar support, and she felt motivated to continue offering kindness, empathy, and understanding wherever she could. She recognized that every interaction, no matter how small, had the potential to create meaningful change, and she felt grateful to be part of a story that demonstrated the power of human connection, compassion, and respect. The day had started like any other, but it had turned into a turning point for the veteran, for the community, and for herself. leaving her with a profound understanding of the importance of seeing, acknowledging, and caring for others.